All right. First time I actually used the scheduling thing on StreamYard, so that was interesting. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the after class stream. Now, half as often, because honestly, doing 2 streams a week is kind of nuts. Okay. Give me a second here to finish setting things up. Lemmy should be joining later. At least he said he would. But yeah. So hopefully he'll be able to join us. Hello, Wooden Railway Edward. But yeah, I just got a brand new 3D printer. I got it all set up last night. I even got a thing printed. It was just like it was a file that already came with the printer. It kind of got messed up because the amount of this filament stuff, the printer came with a bit of filament, but it wasn't enough to finish the print. And apparently you can't just feed in more ink mid-print. Apparently that doesn't work. So there was this like gap in the print. So it kind of got messed up. But as far as everything being level and homed and all that, that's fine. I just need to make sure that when I print something, it has plenty of filament. So, but yeah. So hopefully I'll be able to print some custom items on that. One thing I want to do is I'm going to pull out my work in progress of Edward here. One thing I want to do is I want to add the wheel wells or the splashers in here. I want them to actually be 3D objects and not just painted on. So I hope to add those in because I think that will just help emphasize what Edward is supposed to look like. You know, instead of fucking with all of the wheel arrangement and all that, instead just say like, look, this is where the wheels are supposed to be. Yeah, we're gonna put Edward back up here. So yes, fun times. So I need to, less like Edward and Henry. No. Well, actually, Eddie doesn't look like Edward anymore. This is that's where the camera is. This is what Eddie looks like nowadays, shape-wise. He's gonna change as far as paint work. He's gonna get the same blue that Edward, Gordon, and Thomas now have, and then he's gonna get a much better stripes. I might keep the yellow striping though. I might do that. I don't know. I'm undecided. Because 98462 and 87546, they've never been seen with the red stripes. Now, Eddie is not 98462. I've kind of... He is and he isn't. Honestly, I kind of hate Railway Series Accurate Wooden Railway Edward because the non-driving wheels are way below the running board and it looks ugly. It depends on how you do it. It just depends on how you do it. I had a dream where nobody in the fandom could agree James's basis, so they just decided to make him an LNERC1 Atlantic. Okay. Lemmy. Where are you, Lemmy? He's not responded to my Skype messages. Don't spam him, people. If you do that, I'll have to, like, be mad at you. So, yeah. I don't know what we're going to do until he shows up. That was kind of my whole plan. Lemmy was going to be here, so then I was going to have something interesting to talk about. Lemmy hasn't found his paper clips and is now dead. Making these streams only Wednesdays was actually a good move because they get more hype. I won't disagree with that. Mostly, it makes it that I don't feel like, oh God, I need to do another one of these. Talk about the numbering system more. I feel like I've said there all there is to say about the numbering system so many times. It basically works on so the LMS and BR had this power classification system, where brain. Okay, where, engines were basically rated on a 1 to 10 scale, except instead of 10, no. It's like it was basically on a 1 to 10 scale, except it was actually 0 to 9. So what the numbering system is that the first digit is based on their power classification. So now I don't have anyone currently who's in the zeros. I woke up today at 5 a.m. in the morning due to an Amber Alert telling me that a mountain lion was at the park, not 30 yards away from my house. Interesting. But anyway, so the first digit is basically that designates power classification, or more accurately, a locomotive's power classification designates the first digit of their number, which is basically the same thing, but it's not. So anyway, so like, I'm gonna take the seven. We'll just take the first 7. Thomas through Toby. Edward, Percy, and Toby all have a power classification of 1. James, Thomas, James and Thomas both have a power classification of 3. Gordon has a power classification of 7, and Henry has a power classification of 5. Now, because I want to retain their old numbers in some sort of way, that means Edward, Percy, and Toby are now 102, 106, and 107. Thomas and James are now 301 and 305. Henry is 503, and Gordon is 704. And then I fill in the... Now, obviously, it's not like they got Gordon and gave him the number 704 right off the bat. So the idea is that there were 3 other engines. Yeah, 3. There are 3 other engines that came before Gordon that were in that power classification. I was in... Yeah, I know. I have Skype pulled up here on the computer. So yeah, I know. So Murdoch, Glenn in the box tanks. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to handle the coffee pots and the box tanks. The coffee pots and the box tanks are probably going to get a classification, a power class of 0. And I don't think many box tanks are going to survive the Sodorn mainland, because it's a big talking point how the Sodorn mainland scrapped all their engines. Now, in my universe, the Sodorn mainland only remains bankrupt for 15-ish years, gets revived through a corporate, they get a bailout from the government. Yes, Sudrian Spotlight does use the exact numbering system. That's who I got it from. Yeah, that's where the numberings, that's where I got it from. I had never heard any mentionings of Sudrian Spotlight until I saw his videos. So every time I talk about the numbering system, I talk about it as if no one has ever seen his videos ever, instead of just saying like, oh, it's Sudrian Spotlight's numbering system. Because there are going to be people that are, because I keep on thinking that there are going to be people that are like, oh, wait, who's that? And then I'm surprised when everyone knows who Sudrian Spotlight is. So, or I guess it's Railway Mania is actually the name of his channel. Sudrian Spotlight is the series. But still, you get the idea, is that I keep on treating this as if no one knows who his channel. So what about the coloring system? There is no coloring system. I haven't devised a coloring system. I haven't devised the coloring system because, unlike Sudrian Spotlight, I'm not going that realistic. This is still Sodor. So they're not like, no one's getting retired in the 60s. No one's being withdrawn in the 60s. You know, this is Sodor. We keep our Sudrian ideals intact. So yeah. But what was I saying? Oh, that's right. The Sodorn mainland. The Sodorn mainland, they go bankrupt in 1900 or 1901, whenever it was, but they come back in 1914, and that the government bailing out the Sodorn mainland kind of replaces the government merging the 3 companies. Because the idea is that in Audrey's railway series, is that, you know, the company still existed, but it didn't have any money. You know, it wasn't doing things. It had no income, but it also wasn't paying. It didn't have any payments that it needed to make. So then that company was merged with the 2 active companies that were the TK&E and the W&S. And then they together became the Northwestern Railway. And although the Sodorn mainland didn't have anything to contribute in the form of money, they were the ones that contributed the rails that lie between Kirk Ronan and up to the Ballyhoo tunnels. So in my series, I think, no, they didn't become one company in 1912. The TK&E and the Wellsworth and Sudbury did not formally merge in 1912. They began a merger. They connected to each other. They built the connection, and then they started operating in tandem with each other, and they were gearing up for a merger and started labeling themselves as the Tidmouth, Wellsworth and Sudbury, or the Tidmouth, Knapford and Sudbury, whatever they were going to call themselves. But they started getting ready for that, but they didn't formally complete the merger until they didn't formally complete the merger by the time they formed the Northwestern. So they were in the process of merging, though. In my timeline, they're getting ready to merge, and then the Sodorn mainland gets revived, and the government comes in and says, hey, you three companies, we need you to connect all your railways. You know, it's basically they tell the Wellsworth and Sudbury and the TK&E that, like, hey, you have to build a line to connect to the Sodorn mainland, and then you also need to connect to the to Barrow and Furness. But then you also have to build a line all the way up north to Harwick for the purpose of our national defense. They aren't forced to merge. That is an important part. They are not forced to merge. They are forced to work together to build this joint line. And when the war ends in 1918, that's what the main line becomes, a joint line. For those of you who have watched Stories of Sodor, Victor Tanzig's series, it's the main line and the Arlesborough branch, or at least the main line. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do about the Arlesborough branch, but the main line. So first off, I should clarify that once they reach Arlesborough in 1918, they stop. They don't actually build all the way to Harwick. They're supposed to, but at 1918, they no longer need the line to Harwick. So government support withdraws. So in 1918, the war no longer needs this main line up to Harwick. The government completely withdraws all of its support, and now these three companies are left wondering what to do with all this extra rails. It is decided that, the Sodor and mainland sticks to it, the Kirk Ronan and Ballyhoo. At the time, it's just the Ballyhoo branch. They might actually build the extension to Norby, but so the Sodor and mainland sticks to its area. The Wellsworth and Sudbury sticks to the Brendam branch, and the Tidmouth, Knapford, and Elsbridge sticks to the Elsbridge branch because they haven't built to Farquhar yet. And then they bring in not new engines, but basically these engines who have ended up, coming over and helping during the war effort. Thomas, Edward, and others. These become the Sodor Railway's joint line engines. And Thomas, Edward, and a few other engines operate the main line between Tidmouth and Vickerstown, or Barrow and Furness. because at this point the Furness Railway doesn't actually have problems with them. So yeah, that they operate between Tidmouth and Barrow and Furness. I'm not exactly sure where the Arlesborough branch is going to lie. The Arlesborough branch, that might be something where the Wellsworth and Sudbury kind of takes that over. No, the joint line does run all the way through to Barrow and Furness, because so where the headquarters, if it's Tidmouth to Barrow, so there is no Northwestern headquarters because the Northwestern doesn't exist. So instead, the Tidmouth, Knapford, and Elsbridge Railway, they have their headquarters at Knapford. In fact, in my series, there's going to be two Knapfords. There's Knapford Station, which is from the TV series, and then there's Knapford Junction, which is the railway series. And Knapford Junction was the first Knapford station, but the TK&E have built their new headquarters at TV series Knapford. So there's going to be that headquarters. Then the Wellsworth and Sudbury, they have their headquarters are at Wellsworth. And then the Sodor and Mainland, their headquarters is at Kirkronan. So you'll see where the engines that work the joint line kind of... So the main line at this time would be like a line to share stuff between the companies and stuff. Yes, all three companies have rights to this line, and then there are also a dedicated fleet of engines that work for all three companies. Thomas doesn't work for one of these companies at this point. He works for all three. And it's a very delicate situation because at the time, like, no one's sure whether they're merging or not. After the war, the Wellsworth and Sudbury have kind of pulled out with merging with the TK&E. They no longer feel a need for it. Because I also want to emphasize that these three railways have very different they have very different thought processes. The TK&E is the most humble of the three railways. They're the farm boys. They are just trying to provide a service. So who would Thomas report to? I don't exactly have a name yet. He would report to whoever is in charge of the main line. But that guy, he would report to the heads of all three railways. But the point is that, so, all these three railways, like, they're not sure if they're going to merge or not. There's a bit of competition going on. All three companies have rights to contracts on the main line. And these companies can either, choose to, get their services through the joint line, which benefits all three companies, but they can also ask, one company or the other to do this. And it's going to get a bit tricky depending on the location. And Sir Topham Hatt, so, he, was the chief engineer on the TK&E, and then he was asked to be the lead engineer for the project to build the line. I'm not sure exactly where he is right now. No, he is not at Swindon Works. That was long in his past. So at this point, Topham Hatt probably, at this point, he's probably still answering to Bertram. He hasn't really warmed up to the name Topham yet. He's probably working in one of the workshops, probably the chief mechanical engineer for the TK&E. And he probably does most of looking after the mainline stock. Just because I believe that like each railway probably contributes their own thing to managing the main line, and you know the TK&E theirs could be managing managing the maintenance. But yeah, Sir Topham Hatt, he led the, well, not Sir Topham Hatt. At this point, he would just be Topham Bertram Hatt. So answering to Bertram Hatt, he's the guy who led the whole construction of the line. He's the guy that engineered it out. And the idea is that although he's mainly architectural. So, you know, in his heart, he's an architect. But he's kind of been pushed into building locomotives. He doesn't really have much agency in his own life. He kind of just does what other people tell him he should do. And that's going to be his whole character arc is, while he is also establishing this railway's identity, he also kind of has to establish his own. So in 1922, 1923, the whole Railways Act, the grouping happens, and when the grouping happens, that's when the three railways decide to merge. It is of their own volition. They're the ones that are like, all right, we're going to merge now. Lenny still hasn't answered. So yeah, and it's because, you know, they're given the exception to not, they're given the choice to not merge with the LMS, and they say, yeah, we're not going to merge with the LMS, which makes the LMS very mad, and that's why they deny the Northwestern the ability to run trains into Barrow. So when that happens, they set up shop at Vickerstown initially, because they're like, okay, it's the first station when you come into the island, and it's, you know, the first station on our railway at this point, because they can't run trains into Barrow and Furness. So, you know, the headquarters is at Vickerstown, and, you know, just like in Railway Series fashion, in 1925, the LMS finally lays off and recognizes the Northwestern as a real railway and allows them passage through to Barrow. And likewise, the Northwestern is like, all right, let's move our headquarters. We can either move our headquarters to Barrow or to Tidmouth. And, well, the no-brainer answer to that is to move them to Tidmouth. And so they do. But the station doesn't get downgraded like it does in the Railway Series. It's not important for the station to get smaller, so why would I make it smaller? Just to stick with, you know, a throwaway line, not even a throwaway line, not a throwaway line, but still just one line in Its People, History, and Railways. You know, I'm not downgrading Vickerstown just for that. Not after changing so much. But the reason I even started talking about all this is the Sodor and Mainland had their box tanks scrapped before their closure initially. However, one survives in my timeline, at least, and that's Neil. So the question as to where Glenn, the box tanks, would sit in the numbering system. Neil and the coffee pots are probably going to be in the zeros. So their numbers will probably won't even go up to double digits, because I doubt there'll be that many coffee pots running around. So they'll probably all be, I say single-digit numbers, but these are single-digit numbers preceded by 2 zeros. I'm not sure if those zeros will be written. Well, I'm not even sure if they're going to have their proper numbers written on, because with Neil at least, it's going to be like a Duck and Oliver situation, where he wears the number from his old railway, but like in the books, he's still numbered as like 005 or whatever. So like, while Oliver is 111 and Duck is 308 in my series, they're still going to wear their Great Western Railway numbers. You'll never see them wear the numbers 111 and 308. Since you brought up engine headquarters, can I just say how stupid it is to me that in the TV show, Knapford is the main station, yet the engines are at Tidmouth. Yeah, I mean, they wanted to diversify their locations. They wanted to make sure that it felt like the characters were going places. Because when you think of it, so much of the Railway series just takes place at Tidmouth. So what is Henry? I mean, he's a Black 5. Eventually. Initially, he's a prototype inspired by stolen plans from Gresley's office at Doncaster. Prototype plans that would eventually lead to Gordon. But, you know, he hasn't inadequately signed. Oh, yeah, he'd have 2 different numbers. Everyone always asks, what's Henry? And not, how's Henry? Henry's doing just fine now. But yeah, I think Henry is going to originally be 403. And then Henry will die, and then new Henry will be 503. So, from a mechanical perspective, there are 2 Henrys. But from a character perspective, there's only 1 Henry. I want to emphasize that. Is that although when we see the transition from old Henry to New Henry, he'll act like the same. It will be as if he's the same character the whole time, on a mechanical level, purely mechanical. He is a new engine. Yeah. And I should say that in my series, he's not a full Black 5. It's more that he uses a lot, that he is, for one, much like his old shape is said to superficially be a A1. It's kind of the same deal here, except it's more accurate to say that. In my series, Henry will never look like he was supposed to be an A1. I'm not doing that. Now he is built from prototype plans for the A1, but he's not going to look like an A1. He's going to look very different from Gordon. Henry 2, Henry 2.0, he looks exactly like a Black 5 would in this universe. But he has some mechanical differences internally, which are holdovers from from Henry Mark 1. But there's still a lot of nil. And wow, Lemmy has still not responded. That's weird. I mean, there have been plenty of times where he's ghosted me, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But what about Genry? I don't know who Genry is. Is Genry the name of the big boy that fell down the toothpick bubblegum bridge? As soon as I leave, he's gonna come. Well, I mean, maybe. So how does TV series Knapford in tandem with Railway series Tidmouth? I assume you mean how does TV series Knapford work in tandem with Railway series Tidmouth? TV series Knapford is just a big station. Apparently, I'm the only one who doesn't know who Genry is. Who's Genry? This one. Oh! I didn't know we had a name for that. So Genry is the character from Peter, Sam, and the Refreshment Lady. Okay. He's also an abomination made by Master of the Lemons and Roblox Studio. Well, then he better come on tonight so that I can interrogate him about Genry, because I don't know how long it is that we've been friends with each other, and I've never heard of Genry before. Like they said in the main show, the big station doesn't have to be the main one. So the thing is, in my series, there'll be many big stations, because that's how real life works. You have your big stations, you have your small stations, and then you have, wait, what the fuck? That's a station? Stations. So yeah. The idea is just that Knapford and Tidmouth are a lot bigger cities, towns, whatever, than what they are in the Railway series. And Knapford has just grown big enough well, and Tidmouth, they've both grown big enough to have multiple stations. In fact, I have a map that I've been working on over here in my window. I redid it. And I did implement Sam Wilkinson's stupid loop line, but you know what? It's necessary because it was mentioned in the Railway series. But I did something different. I did different. My headcanon, Genry is one of the other engines on the Pasta and Noodle Railway. So I'm going to quick explain my little area between Tidmouth and Wellsworth. So we have your standard mainline affair, and so we go from Tidmouth, then we go to Big Knapford, then we go to Knapford Junction. I should say it's not called Big Knapford. It's just called Knapford Station. And then from Knapford Station, we go to Knapford Junction. From Knapford Junction, we go to Crosby, and from Crosby, we go to Wellsworth. In between Crosby and Wellsworth is a Y, is a Y junction. And I mean Y as in W-Y-E. So engines from either Crosby or Wellsworth can come and go onto this Y, and then they'll head up to, I'm thinking of calling it Upper Crosby or the Crosby Industrial District, but it's basically a large industrial plant, industrial area. There's tons of different factories, and the whole point is that the reason the Wellsworth and Sudbury went to Crosby is because of reaching the industries in Crosby. So that was built by the Wellsworth and Sudbury. Later on, after 1918, the Tidmouth, Knapford, and Elsbridge Railway extends the line from Elsbridge down to Crosby because they want to because their railway is small. They need extra income. So they're like, all right, we'll provide extra services. We'll take a line to Crosby. And now the equipment that they manufacture in Crosby, we can take straight from Crosby to the farmers along our line, instead of needing to rely on the Wellsworth and Sudbury to bring it here to Knapford for us to then bring it up. So then they cut out the middleman and they make more money. I'm not entirely sure how to justify the line that then goes from Elsbridge to Tidmouth, but I did put a station on there, just like on the Sam Wilkinson map, just to put a thing there. I use that map for inspiration, not for not as fact. But yeah, I'm putting that little station there. But so when trains, now I should explain that between Tidmouth and, oh no, I do remember what I'm naming that station. This is part of my expansion of Tidmouth thing, is so when you leave Tidmouth on the main line, there is a junction. It's another Y junction. So also when you leave Knapford heading north for Tidmouth, you come to this junction, and both of these lines, they go towards Elsbridge, but before they reach Elsbridge, you reach Lower Tidmouth. So again, it's just part of this whole making the area between Tidmouth and Knapford Junction a whole a more suburban area with lots of passenger stuff. So the loop line, it literally, the stations on the loop line, you are Upper Tidmouth, Ellsbridge, and then we'll call it Upper Crosby. We'll call it Upper Crosby for now. And Upper Crosby is also where the pack yard is going to be located. Again, there's going to be a lot of factories and industrial stuff going on there. And it's connected. It connects to the main line with Y junctions on each end, and it actually facilitates the ability for Donald and Douglas. So eventually, there's going to be an extension built up to Harwick because there's going to be coal mines up in Harwick. Again, inspired by Railway Mania. So eventually, we'll get to this point where Donald and Douglas could run coal trains all the way from Harwick down to Tidmouth, take the loop line to Wellsworth to avoid using the main line, and then down to Brendam. And that's my whole deal for the loop. I've added a new narrow gauge railway to Sodor. It originally started out as so there's a line up in the north of Sodor which runs from Harwick to Craigweir and also to Ballasween. I think it's called Ballasween. Oh, wait, I have the map. I literally have the map right here. I can just look at, Ballasween. It's called the Cronk and Harwick Railway because it was originally supposed to go to Cronk, but never did. This is going to be a narrow gauge line. A certain yellow Sir Handel repaint may work there. And that may be where a few Pitt era narrow gauge engines end up while they're waiting to go to the Skarloey Railway, so they don't interfere with the numbering system. Anyway, this railway starts at Harwick, and it does have a branch running up to Ballasween. I might close that down because it's weird. Or maybe I'll make it an industrial line. I'm not sure. I don't want to just deprive that town of a station because it's a considerably big town to not have a station. Because typically if it's like one of those gray blocks, it has a station there with a few exceptions. Harwick and Ballasween being two of the biggest. Let's see, Harwick, Ballasween. Yeah, Harwick and Ballasween are the only two gray splotches that don't have a rail line going to them. Also Kelsthorpe, but that's just because Kelsthorpe Road is far away from Kelsthorpe. So that's technically they do. Oh God, I'm looking at the Sam Wilkinson version of the map, and I've just noticed how the thing that he put in for Great Waterton is literally just, it's, let's see, what, I think it's just a copy and paste of Kronk. Yeah, it's just a copy, and Great Waterton is just Kronk copy and pasted. God, that is so bad. Did I did. I X'd out Skype. Well, he didn't respond anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. Lemmy is deeply hurting me right now. No, not really. He's screwed up all my plans. So anyway, this new line from Craig Weir, I've extended it. I've extended the line from Craig Weir. It runs through the mountainy area. Just a moment. I heard my phone buzz. It's over here. Nothing that I need to be bothered with. So it runs around through the mountains, through Misty Valley, and then at near Misty Valley is where the line branches off and goes to Coldy Fell Quarry, which is inspired by a wooden railway destination, which is the only reason it exists, because I need to justify the existence of every wooden railway destination. And I can't have a Coldy Fell Quarry without there being a quarry at Coldy Fell. So I needed to justify that. So you can thank that for the reason this railway now exists. But yeah, so from there at Misty Valley, the tracks continue, and then they go all the way to Peel Godred, where they meet with the electric railway. Even the Bubble Factory? Yes, even the Bubble Factory. Not, however, the Bubble Loader. But yes, in a way. You see, in my universe, the Bubble Loader is not a literal bubble loader, but is instead just a very eccentric looking thing. It's not actually used for the purpose of loading bubbles. But a bubble liquid factory is not unrealistic. Mr. Bubbles is, like, for one, more of a mascot. Like, Mr. Bubbles is like Ronald McDonald, except for bubble liquid and not fast food. You know, he's the mascot character. And there's a bubble factory, and this bubble factory like gives tours, and like they have this like bubble loader thing that's like it's just there to look weird and wacky. How do you justify the giant Tommy Thomas? That I can't do. I haven't gotten to justifying every Tommy destination. I'm just justifying wooden railway destinations. And I think I've just found the only logical way that you can justify the bubble loader. So yeah, what other modifications have I made to the Northwestern Railway? Yes, the extension of the Skarloey Railway. So the one thing that's nice about how my map came out is that when you look at it, it doesn't look like the Skarloey Railway has just doubled in length due to its extension to Ulfstead. So Ulfstead is a lot further east than it is on any official map, which I'm okay with. So again, I've utilized another Y junction, which I like. It's between Skarloey and Lakeside. And it goes to one of those random hit era stations, Rumblin' Bridge, Elephant Park, I don't know. Goes under the Peel Godred branch. Then we reach a junction. If we go northwest, we reach another hit era station. If we go southwest, we get to Blue Mountain Quarry. And then from Blue Mountain Quarry, there's actually a closed line. There's a old closed down line that goes to Boulder Mountain Quarry. The idea being that the Skarloey Railway extended with the purpose of reaching Blue Mountain Quarry, and then they further extended to Boulder Mountain Quarry when it was being established by the Northwestern. But they had to go through Blue Mountain to get to Boulder Mountain. Consume bubbles, kids. So anyway, if we continue on that northwest line, we reach Ulfstead, which has a lot of junctions. There are 5 lines that come into Ulfstead. There is, let's see, 2 of these lines belong to Flora's old tramway. The northwestmost line heads along the majority of Flora's tramway, and it goes through Arlesdale End, Lower Arlesborough, Other Station. Other Station actually comes before Lower Arlesborough, and then terminates at Callan on Ducks Branch Line. Wait, okay. I joined this 14 minutes, so are you? Okay, so I plan on building a layout with this stuff. I might also do it in trains. I'm not entirely sure, but this is definitely all headcanon. That's for sure. But for me, nothing exists that isn't headcanon. Headcanon is my only canon. When are we going to see you clear some snow? Never. I hate fucking snow. Yeah. You will never see me clear snow. Never. Ever, ever. My dad likes his tractor too much to let anyone else clear snow. Speaking of tramways, what about Toby's old line? Toby's old line is in England, in East Anglia. But I have repurposed the idea behind Toby's old line and given it to Flora. So Flora used to run the tramway from Callan to Ulfstead, and from Ulfstead it then went up to Great Waterton. Thomas's branch line eventually gets extended from Farquhar and it goes up to Ulfstead. And then it's around that time where they reopen the line from Callan to Ulfstead. And it's through all this where they rediscover Great Waterton. And then when the Skarloey Railway extends to build their new quarry at Blue Mountain, so when they're extending to build their new quarry at Blue Mountain Quarry, the Earl gives them the funds to build an extension to Ulfstead Castle, because he wants the Skarloey Railway to meet with Ulfstead Castle, because he's that crazy of a guy. Meanwhile, with Thomas's branch line, they've extended to Ulfstead and are further extending to Ulfstead Mine, also known as Boulder Quarry. Boulder Quarry. With the branch line extending as far as Boulder Quarry, with Boulder Quarry established not too far from Blue Mountain Quarry, the Skarloey Railway extends further through Blue Mountain all the way to Boulder Mountain. Well, it's not called Boulder Mountain. It's called Ulfstead Mine. That's the official name of the quarry, Ulfstead Mine. And once that line, once the Ulfstead Mine closes down, the Northwestern instead builds tracks to Blue Mountain, and then where that quarry is established. And that takes over a lot of the land from the Ulfstead mine, but it leaves the more dangerous parts of that area alone. The island isn't actually all that much bigger. It's actually smaller. There's a lot more stuff, but it's also a lot more dense. Which I think helps justify a lot of more things. Like, it really doesn't make sense for the Skarloey Railway to be twice as long and reach Ulfstead, but it doesn't, because Ulfstead is like 50% closer. So if I would actually show you a picture of the Skarloey Railway, it wouldn't, the amount of length they've added onto it, they might have increased it by a third. I'd say. They've increased the length by a third. So yeah. Did I make any other alterations to the island of Sodor? I don't think I did. Oh, yes, I did. I made one more alteration. One more major alteration. For one, not a major alteration, but a minor alteration. At Marthwaite, on the Arlesdale Railway, there's a ballast mine a ways from it. But Marthwaite is more the junction to the mine. The mine is not located at Marthwaite. The mine is located quite a ways away from... Oh, no, not Marthwaite. Farquhar Road. Farquhar Road. But again, this is on the Arlesdale Railway. So miniature railway. But yeah, the amount of track between Farquhar Road Station and the mine, I mean, the mine looks like it's closer to Arlesborough Bridge Street. So with Flora's old tramway stopping at Lower Arlesborough, and me needing a location for Bertram to be dumped at, I decided that the mine, that mine on the Arlesdale Railway, formerly the Mid-Sodor Railway, that, and this is again, this is similar as it is on the Sam Wilkinson map. This time it wasn't so much inspiration from the Sam Wilkinson map as it was that just things that like the tramway took more inspiration from Unlucky Tug than Sam Wilkinson. And it just so happened that that mine just ended up being a great place to be Bertram's old mine, which is also the case on the Sam Wilkinson map. So, yay, that happened to work. Not all of his ideas on this map were bad. Most of them were, but not all of them. And that was just one that just, it happened to work out nicely. What were other things that I wanted to mention? Yes. I also built a line. I also created a line. It comes out of Ballyhoo, heads north, crosses over Henry's Tunnel, and then heads east a bit, and then that's where not only where the diesel works is, but it's also I like how on my screen Justin's map looks like a... Are you seeing my map? I'm not screen sharing. Oh, that's right. You can't see my map. I forgot all about how, yeah, you can't actually. I wasn't, yeah. There, it's right there. You're not, I wasn't trying to bring it up clearly. I was just talking about it. I might do a like nice video on it someday, but not right now. But yeah, there's a little industrial line coming off of Ballyhoo that heads up into up a bit north of Vickerstown, and that's where the cement works are going to be located. That's going to be where the diesel works is going to be located. The oil refinery. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about the cement works. That might go at Rolf's Castle, Kirk Ronan, maybe. Yeah, it's not. It's not supposed to. I'm not intentionally being like, "Hey, look at my map." I'm just describing it to you while looking at it. But some of you seem to have been able to pick out that, like, oh yeah, I can see things. Not clearly, and it's not the point. The point is not to show it off to you in a clear manner. But yeah, I guess we've just been talking about headcanon stuff today. I was gonna hopefully get some pointers from Lemmy on 3D modeling, and that's what I was going to do today. 3D printer. But yeah, I dropped the thing that I was fucking with. But yeah, I guess we're just talking headcanon. I guess it wouldn't be impossible for me to like pick up the camera and yeah, but you're not gonna be able to see it because it's dark out. I can just barely see it, and that's because I have the gift of knowledge. You know, I put it there so I know where all the lines are. But yeah. I think if there's any part of this map that I'm not quite happy with, it's the section between it's the section it's this Ulfstead, Great Waterton, Boulder Mountain, Blue Mountain area. I might completely rework that. I think the line heading up to Great Waterton will suffice. But I'm not sure about everything else. Though, also, Morgan's Mine. I almost wonder if I should relocate Great Waterton so that Morgan's Mine could be another old Mid-Sodor mine. Let's not overdo it. Still want to try and work Morgan's Mine in there somewhere. But maybe Morgan's Mine just won't have anything to do with Great Waterton. We'll see. We'll have to look at the actual destination itself. Who knows? Maybe Bertram's quarry can be Morgan's Mine. There goes the title. A few times it might have fit. What did I completely forget what I... yes, Thomas Plastic Railway. I guess I'm going to have to rename that. Who the heck is Morgan, and why do they have a mine? I mean, lots of mines are named after the people that open them. So why does anyone have a mine, really? I mean, everyone has to... I'm just astounded by the amount of mines that end up on Sodor. On my map, the cement works is located on a small goods line near Kildane. Yeah, that works. I want to put the cement works on the Sodor and mainland. Though I guess by that logic, I should not be putting it up in the up north of Vickerstown because I want that industrial line to come later. So yeah, I think I'm going to move... you know what? For a while, I was going to put... I know what I'm going to do now. I'm still going to keep that industrial a little bit. But instead of putting the cement works up there, I'm going to put the ironworks up there. Which is going to be weird to have an ironworks in Vickerstown and then literally just across the channel have an iron and steel works at Barrow. But whatever, what do I care? This is going to be difficult because it's dark, but I'm going to... Do. Okay, there. The cement works is now located at Ballyhoo. Sodor is secretly Minecraft with its infinite resources. They're not infinite, but I want to have it that Sodor relies a lot on export. And you know what? While I have the markers out, I keep on forgetting to X off my days. Tomorrow I get to go to an op session, so that'll be fun. behind watching. I think that's a new record. And it went down to 7. So let's see. You know what? I'm just gonna try and spitball ideas of ops that will happen on this railroad once it's finished. What's an ops session? Basically, we run trains realistically. I know there are two guys whose houses I go to, and they have model railroads set up in their basement, and they run the trains realistically. And this is like American model railroad. This is like, Pennsylvania area for both of them. And then there's a model railroad club called the Keystone Midland that I go to. And again, they have a big layout set up, and then we all run trains realistically. So, yeah, so I get to go to the one guy's house tomorrow night, and then this Saturday I'll be going to the club, and I'm really excited for the club ops because for a while I've been doing road crew, and road crew is fun. It has a lot of variety. You can go from running through trains, which will run, and this is the perfect transition for what I want to talk about in accordance with my eventual railroad, whether it be with wooden railway or HO or trains. But so I've been doing road crew on all 3 of these layouts, and where road crew is fun is like, so for one, you can start out simple. With road crew, at first I did a lot of staging to staging. And for those of you that don't know, a staging yard is basically, it's typically, there is no scenery in the staging yard. Staging yards are basically shelves with trains on them. Lemmy's not backstage, Wooden Railway Edward. I'm here in the studio. I would know if he'd come on, and he's not. So, but he hasn't even responded. He hasn't even seen my message yet, because you know how the little icon drops under? It hasn't done that yet, and it still says last seen 4 hours ago on Skype. So, and you know what? Something probably came up. Something happened. It happens. Whatever. But yeah. So again, back to staging. So staging is basically where you set things up, and staging represents all the locations that aren't on your layout. In most cases, staging represents the real world. If your layout doesn't represent the real world, which in many cases it does, and in many cases it doesn't, Sodor for me. Obviously, I'm a freelance guy, even though my freelance is based off of the fictional work of someone else. So it's kind of double freelance or proto freelance because it's based off of something. But yeah. And anyway, so the staging it represents all those off layout locations. So like with my staging yards, my staging yard will either be Barrow-in-Furness, where it's like the last modeled location would be Vickerstown, or I will have 2 staging yards, which would represent each side of Barrow-in-Furness. So you have Barrow Inverness modeled, but you have trains that exit south and go into the south staging, and then there are trains that exit north and go into north staging. Or, there are trains that exit north staging and enter Barrow, and again on the other side. Freelance based on real life, kinda. Yeah, most freelance model railroads, in this discussion, freelance doesn't just mean like, oh, just a model railroad where they just like have trains running a loop or whatever. Like when we're talking about freelance versus prototype, freelance is still realistic. It's just, did the thing exist in real life? In prototype, it's, I am modeling this real location. For instance, Barrow Inverness. Modeling Barrow Inverness would be prototype modeling because it is a real location. Modeling Tidmouth would be freelance because it's not a real location. But it's also a freelance based on a freelance. But a freelance that never was a full, well, I guess he did actually make a Tidmouth model, but not the point. The point being is that, when I first started doing ops, they had me run a lot of staging to staging trains, where it's, you start on this end of the layout and you go to the other end of the layout. Because that's simple to do. You don't need to worry about calling the dispatcher every time, all the time, because you need to do that when you're running locals because of flipping switches and signaling and all that. Sometimes. It depends on where your industries are located in accordance to your interlockings. Interlockings basically being junctions, but interlockings are basically what exists between a block. You have your block, which is signaled, and it's basically the signals are red if a train is occupying this block. Then you have an interlocking, which is basically a whole bunch of switches, and then you have your next block. And sometimes that interlocking will also be a place where two tracks meet. It's complicated, and I don't want to get into explaining it all that much. So yeah. So I did have a lot of staging to staging trains. Sometimes I would stop in like the main classification yard to drop off and pick up a block of cars. In most cases, actually, because that was the purpose of these trains, really, was to take cars on and off the layout. Very few times where there will be times where trains will run straight from staging to staging. It's not really that interesting, though. But those guys basically do it when they have a whole bunch of rolling stock, but no industry on their layout to use it with. So like, someone might have like a intermodal train that runs straight from staging to staging because they have all these intermodal cars, but they don't have an intermodal yard. So they're just like, all right, we'll run it from staging to staging. I have started running a lot more locals in ops, which is, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. It's, you start at, a big yard and you run to smaller industries and switch out cars. I guess really I haven't been running many locals. What I've been running is technically turns, but a turn is more just a version of the local, where it's you return to the location you start from. But anyway, the reason that I'm excited for my op session on Saturday is because this time I signed up for the station drill, which is basically, so there's the station. So on this layout, they have a station master. Not any of the other layouts have that, but the station master, he arranges the passenger trains, which is a lot more interesting on this layout than it typically is, because they have to switch out dining cars and baggage cars and stuff like that. And they build the passenger trains. The other layouts that I work on, they don't do any building of passenger trains. The passenger trains start in staging and they end in staging. So what the station drill does is they help the station master, because it takes more than one yard crew to handle that, and then they can work trains for both ends. So I signed up for that job, so I can learn more of that stuff, which will be nice because it's a fun change of pace, and I've wanted to get more of the switching stuff. And wow, I can tell people are losing interest because we just went down to 2 viewers. Yeah. But anyway, the thing that I wanted to get into in relating to that is the types of operations I want to run on my eventual Sodor layout. So of course there are the trains that I want to have Barrow modeled. So of course there are going to be the BR trains that run from staging, that will run, that like they will all have dealings in Barrow, and they'll probably all touch staging. Like come out of North staging, switch cars at Barrow, and then head into South staging. Or, head from either staging yard, then terminate in Barrow, or start from Barrow and then go to either staging yard. I'm not too concerned with how that's going to figure out, because again, that's going to be more, for one, if I can find for real timetables for Barrow, I'm just going to base it off of that. But if I can't, it's basically just going to be, okay, how many cars do I need to get onto the layout? How many cars do I need to get off of the layout? But for the Northwestern, I'm really thinking of my freight operations because I really like freight operations. Passenger trains are fine, but they're not as cool as freight trains are. So, for one, I've kind of thought of 4 different types of freight trains: express freight, through freight, locals, and turns. And again, locals are turns are just kind of a version of a local, but they do operate differently. And an express freight, it's kind of just, while a turn is like a smaller local, an express freight is like a bigger through freight in what I'm doing. So in my idea, an express freight travels between an express freight either terminates or originates from Tidmouth, and then either terminates and then, okay, let me rethink how I'm going to say this. Express freights travel between Tidmouth and Barrow or beyond. So an express freight will not stop between Tidmouth and Barrow. So that basically leaves 4 basic combinations: 2 westbound, 2 eastbound. So you could either start from Tidmouth and stop at either Barrow or South Staging, or you can start from, or you can end in Tidmouth and start from either Barrow or South Staging. And then what's more, on the South Staging, with a train that's coming from South, with a train that's going to or from South Staging, they can stop at Barrow and do work, possibly. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's necessary at that point. I might just want to make an express freight and not have it stop at Barrow. Then we have our through freights. And the through freights through freights operate on both the main lines and the branch lines. I should also mention that at this point, everything only refers to the standard gauge lines. The narrow gauge lines operate off of their own less stringent system. With the slight exception of the Col Fell, they operate on a very tight system, but that's more safety precaution wise, more than how they operate wise. That's kind of its own whole thing. But yeah, the main line is the only line that operates the express freights, but all the lines will operate the through freights. Is the Wild Nor'Wester and the Flying Kipper called those names when they get on BR? The Wild Nor'Wester is. I'm not sure about the Flying Kipper, because I'm not sure where the Flying Kipper goes. Does it? Because if it might only go as far as Barrow. I haven't figured that one out. But I'd imagine it does. I'd imagine it still keeps its name. The Wild Nor'Wester especially, because the whole idea is that... Oh, the Flying Kipper. Where was it? Where did they say that it goes to Manchester? That's true, though. Yeah, the Flying Kipper might not actually have a name. But it's what the workmen call it, which I think fits into the real world nicer. Because, there would be paperwork saying, like, no, there's no train called the Flying Kipper that comes into Manchester, but you can't deny that a nickname existed. It's hard to deny that. But you can deny that there was this train that was named the Flying Kipper. Which is my one problem with the Wild Nor'Wester. It would be pretty easy to go to the, I forget, St. Pancras. Not Pancras. I don't think that's how that's pronounced. Whatever. The station, it would be very easy to go to the mainland, the London station where the Wild Nor'Wester is supposed to show up and say, hey, was there ever a train that came in here that's called the Wild Nor'Wester? And it would be pretty easy for some history buff to say, no, the Wild Nor'Wester doesn't exist. Now, it's also possible for people to say Sodor doesn't exist. So, there's always anachronisms when it comes to this sort of thing. But I try to avoid them as much as possible. Probably a bit too much. I probably go too crazy on avoiding the anachronisms of, completely replacing a small, tiny island with a much bigger and more substantial one. Which I will say, the nice thing about Sodor replacing an existing island is that any reference to Wallonie can just be replaced with Sodor. No, the Wild Nor'Wester would be treated just like any express. It's still an express. An express is an express. Now, engines from BR would definitely not look at the Northwestern. They wouldn't be very pleased with the Northwestern, but they'd treat the Wild Nor'Wester just like any other express train. Because that's a customer thing. That's a customer service thing. You know, I don't want them to just abandon realism for the sake of their rivalry with the Northwestern. That might be true. The BR engines wouldn't treat the Wild Nor'Wester like it's this big grand thing. However, they'd still treat it like they treat every other express train. That being said, they have a lot of express trains because there's a lot of railway. But in my universe, the Northwestern has like 4 express trains. But the Wild Nor'Wester is like the premier express. Is he now? Ah, he is. But yeah, they wouldn't treat it any less. Any less than they would an express train. And they probably wouldn't treat express trains less than the Wild Nor'Wester would, because express trains, although they don't bring in great revenue, they bring in great promotion. The Sudrian, the Limited, and the Wild Nor'Wester. Yeah, I know those are the 3 main ones. Those are the 3 ones in the Railway series. Again, from Railway Mania, he has those timetables that he released. I'm using those timetables as the basis for my passenger operations. So, and I think on that he had 4 express trains in addition to the Wild Nor'Wester. Though the Wild Nor'Wester was weird. It was listed as both an express train and a standard mainline train. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with all that. But basically, I'm going to take those mainline trains and make that my schedule. And 4 of them will be called proper express trains. Though he also has his trains going as far as Carnforth. I'm not going to do that. Or at least I'm not going to have the main passenger trains, the commuter trains do that. Maybe the Wild Nor'Wester, it'll go all the way to London, but the other 4 express trains can go as far as Carnforth. Maybe I'll do that. But yeah, there are going to be a few express engines on Sodor. Oh, someone asked about Emily earlier, and I never got back to it. How does Emily fit into this canon? Does she arrive earlier? In my canon, she arrived after Thomas and Edward in 1918 to help with the express trains on the joint line, which was inspired by your canon. Wow, awesome. Yeah, that's about the time I have her arriving. The idea is that her and number 1, which is her and her last remaining sister, the one that was preserved, they were both tarped and set aside once the other members of their class were scrapped. But once the Northwestern came looking for a express engine. The GNR untarped her and, well, maybe not tarped her, but they brought her out of storage and were like, all right, we have one to set aside for preservation. You can have this one. So anyway, she's the first second express engine. Edward is the first express engine. She's the first dedicated express engine. And then after that, Alfred comes along, and Emily gets taken off express duties. I should mention that. She gets taken off pretty early on. Alfred comes along. He doesn't like die or try and kill Sodor or anything. He's just an engine working on the island. He takes over express duties in the early 20s until Gordon shows up. I'm not sure whether Alfred will be how soon or late Alfred will be retired from express duties. But yeah, there will be Gordon, Patriot, or Isle of Man, actually. He's a Patriot class, but one of the Patriot classes was named Isle of Man. So we'll just call him Isle. That sounds like a name. Isle, yeah. Isle. He comes around along. Silver Link, often known as Spencer. Those are the three big ones: Gordon, Isle, and Spencer. Or should I call him Man? Nah. Yeah, we'll call him Isle. It sounds like a real name, but like not a simple name. I like it. Isle. I'm really proud of myself for that one. Maybe too proud. But yeah, those are the big three. And of course, then Pip and Emma come along, but I don't think they count. What is Emily's number in this? 101. Because initially she arrives on the joint line, and the joint line are kind of fast and loose with numbers. Like Thomas and Edward get numbered 1 and 2, but like no one else really gets numbers. But it's kind of a we're too busy for this shit sort of ordeal. And then they end up renumbering once they become the Northwestern, and that's when they implement the power classification numbering system, and Emily gets numbered 101. Despite the fact that Edward came first, but that wasn't really their concern at the time. So, where was I? Yes. Express trains. Goods express trains. So I think there will be at least 4 express goods. Again, in that like one from Tidmouth to Barrow, one from Tidmouth to South Staging, one from Barrow to Tidmouth, and then one from South Staging to Tidmouth. Then there are through freights. Now, the branch lines all have through freights as well as the main line. And on the branch lines, a through freight would be identified as a freight train that runs runs straight from one end of the line to the other, with the possible exception of the Farquhar branch, because their classification yard is located at Elsbridge. So with the Farquhar branch, a through freight would run from Knapford to Elsbridge, and from Elsbridge to Farquhar. Um, so yeah, I'm thinking here for a minute. Yeah, that works. Yeah, because I wanted to diversify where the branch lines each had their classification yard. I didn't want it like all to be at the terminus or all to be at the junctions. And the Farquhar branch was just interesting enough that I decided I'd put it at Elsbridge. So it's kind of right in the middle. But, upon the construction of the line, it would have been the terminus. And since they had a classification yard at Tidmouth, they wouldn't need one at Knapford. It wouldn't make sense. So yeah, on a branch line, with the exception of the Farquhar branch, it basically means it's a goods train that runs from the terminus to the junction. So just going through all the branch lines here. And we'll do this based on Audrey's map, not on my map, to make it simple. You know what? No, we're not going to do it with all the branch lines, but to use a few as an example, like on the Arlesborough branch, a through freight would run straight from Tidmouth to Arlesborough or from Arlesborough to Tidmouth. Now, once the extension to Harwick is established, through freights will also run from Arlesborough to Harwick and then from Harwick to Arlesborough. I'm not sure if a straight through freight from Harwick to Tidmouth will be a thing. I'm not sure. It's another one of those, it depends on where I put the classification yard. Because yeah, it's weird. It's a weird relationship those two lines have with each other. Because Harwick doesn't really operate the same because it's not a branch line, it's an extension of a branch line. But it operates somewhat independently as to not screw with how the Arlesborough branch has been running up to this point. So yeah. I imagine there are multiple passengers. Others go further, but no further than Manchester. Yeah, I mean, the three places that I imagine trains stopping that are beyond Barrow, that are run by a Sodor train, are London for the Wild Northwester. That's specifically for the Wild Northwester. Then Manchester and Carnforth. And I think Carnforth is on the way to Manchester. If I'd pull up the Google map and just follow the railway. So I think the Wild Northwester is the only train that goes as far as it goes. But I'd imagine one might see Murdoch take a goods train as far as Carnforth, or maybe even Manchester. Though it could be that the Flying Kipper might be the only train that goes as far as it goes. But I also don't know if it was Audrey's intention that Henry takes it all the way to Manchester, or if Henry gives it to another engine at Barrow, which takes it on to Manchester. Because it can go either way. And that really affects how I do my express freights. But ultimately, they're the least of my concern because they're the least interesting. They're the ones that it's all the work happens at Tidmouth and Tidmouth, maybe Barrow, but it's mostly just train to staging. It's mostly for getting cars on and off the layout. But the through freights, where they're interesting is that typically where most through freights end up in staging at one point or another, nearly none of these through freights will. There will be some, but no, not even any through freights that end up in staging would be BR through freights. And that's a different situation entirely. So through freights on the main line, on the branch line, they run from one end of it to one end to the other, with the exception of the Farquhar branch because of its weird Elsbridge situation. Through freights on the main line run run between any two main yards. So there's a lot of stations where they don't have a main yard. They might have a lot of industries set up, but it's all industrial spurs. There's no sidings for sorting cars. So the main yards on my version of the main line are Tidmouth, Wellsworth, Kildane, Vickerstown, and Barrow. So through freights can run between any of those locations. With the exception of a through freight, the exception is through freights that go from Vickerstown to Barrow. Those are not classified as a through freight just because of the minimal amount of length. Those are typically considered a yard local, where it's just taking cars from one yard to another. So possibilities for through freights. Of course, for every eastbound option, there's a westbound version of it, just to make things simple. So for every train I mention here, there's a second one. There's the Tidmouth to Wellsworth option, Tidmouth to Kildane, Tidmouth to Vickerstown, and Tidmouth to Barrow. And then again, there are two trains for all those options. Then there's Wellsworth to Kildane, Wellsworth to Vickerstown, Wellsworth to Barrow, Kildane to Vickerstown, and Kildane to Barrow. So there's 9 options there. You know, multiply that by the fact that, you know, east and west, that's good 18 through freights. I should be writing this shit down. I won't worry about the express freights because I still haven't quite figured out how that works. But yeah, 18 through freights. And that's just for the main line. You know, and then factor in the branch lines. And so I'm going to make a few assumptions here. For one, that the Harwick and Arlesborough act completely separately from each other. And also that a through freight never goes beyond the junction. Like, we never have a through freight where, you know, a stone train goes all the way from Farquhar and then passes Knapford and continues on to Tidmouth. That will happen. sometimes. It's going to. But for now, I'm going to make the assumption that it doesn't. So with that in mind, so going through the branches. Oh God, I forgot how complicated the Ballyhoo branch is with its new industrial line and the fact that it has a loop. Well, we're going to save that one for last. Harwick branch, 2 through freights. Arlesborough, again, 2 through freights. The loop line. That one's weird because it has so many possible destinations. I guess Knapford and Crosby can't qualify as through freight destinations because they're not major yards. So if we just run it from Tidmouth to Wellsworth, and then Elsbridge is also a main yard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 through freights. So we've gotten up to 10 at this point. Then Thomas's branch line, add another 6 through freights. For a whole 16. Brendam branch, 2 through freights. We're up to 18. Peel Godred branch, another 2 through freights, bringing it up to 20. Kirk Ronan. 22. We're at 22 through freights at this point. Then Ballyhoo. And this is a weird one. Do I qualify? I guess a run from Vicarstown to Crovan's Gate could work if it was a turn. No, the main harbor for Knapford is at Knapford Junction. There is no big Knapford harbor. The big mainline harbor is all at Tidmouth. So Percy and Toby with their stone trains, they'll bring them down to Knapford Harbor. And at Knapford Harbor, so the mainline engines can reach Railway Series Knapford Harbor from the main line. There is a slope that comes down and meets the harbor. And they can go down to the harbor, but they can't go up the branch. So Toby and Percy will bring these trains to the harbor, and they will either go to the piers or they will go to the interchange. And every junction has an interchange. This is where, and really how this works is big engines don't come down the slope to get to the interchange. Percy and Toby go up, and they run up to the interchange yard. And they'll leave whatever freight cars there for the mainline engines, and then they'll collect whatever cars the mainline engines have left for them. And if stone needs to go to the mainland, for instance, some of those stone trucks will go up to that interchange. Though I guess if this is your headcanon, then you do you. But I'm just saying for my thing is there is no big harbor at Knapford. There's just the Railway Series harbor. The big harbor is at Tidmouth. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that there'll be at least 25 through freights through the branch lines, plus the 18 from the main line, and adjusting for, missing one or two. I could have close to 45 through freights. So yeah. Now, not all those combinations are necessarily what's the word I'm looking for? Not all those are necessarily realistic and are going to survive, so we'll see. Isn't the Railway Series Knapford Harbor Elsbridge Harbor from the TV series? No. Elsbridge Harbor from the TV series is Railway Series Knapford Harbor. It's the other way around. Which...
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
No. Siri over here thinking I'm talking to her. God damn it. But yeah, I know it doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is. But also, Elsbridge Harbor is a creation of Sodor Island 3D. They made it up. That's in the TV series. That that Railway Series looking harbor never had anything to do with Elsbridge. The reason we connect the two is because we know Elsbridge is the junction. So we say, oh, if they moved the junction to Elsbridge, then obviously they must have moved the Knapford to Elsbridge. Not necessarily. There's a very large chance that they didn't do that at all. So, yeah, the whole Elsbridge Harbor thing, that's an invention of Sodor Island 3D. So, let's move on to the next number of trains, which is going to be a whole lot harder for me to come up with numbers for. Locals. And the reason this is going to be a bit more difficult is locals can run absolutely anywhere. All they have to do is start from... They have to start and terminate in a major yard. But they can do work. They can work at anywhere. I don't think I really emphasize this on a through freight. A through freight can start at Tidmouth, stop at Wellsworth and Kildane and Vickerstown and Barrow. But what happened, and they'll drop off and they'll set off and pick up cars at each of these locations. However, they won't stop anywhere in between. They only do work at major yards. Locals do all the work at all the yards in between. are all the industries in between. So I think what I'm going to do is a local will never go any further than the next main yard. So locals running out of Tidmouth will never go any further than Wellsworth. And then there are two options for locals. You know, there are the locals that they run to multiple industries in between Tidmouth and Wellsworth, and then they return to Tidmouth. And then there's the local that runs from Tidmouth to Wellsworth and then stops there. Now that engine can be assigned to a new local, and that local that may go back to Tidmouth, or it may be a local that goes to Kildane. Or that engine could be assigned to a through freight that runs to Barrow. You know, don't get the trains mixed up with the engines. So yeah. Though there's a part of me that just really likes the idea of having this really slow local that just stops at every single yard all the way to Barrow. But at the same time, that would be insane. But yeah, I think that's how I'm going to limit myself, because it makes sense. It makes sense that they run between the two major yards. But yeah, locals are probably going to what may blah 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 are probably locals are probably what's going to make up most of the trains on the branch lines. Through freights will make up a considerable amount of mainline traffic because there are so many major locations. Topham gives James that stopping train whenever he's pissed off at him. Yeah, that was my inspiration. It's just a slow freight. It's the slow freight. And it stops at every station to pick up and set off cars. But part of me almost imagines that the train that James gets in what's that story called? Dirty Objects. Let's see. He crashes at Marin, doesn't he? Or does he crash at Wellsworth? In Dirty Objects, is that Marin or Wellsworth? Time to do some research. Dirty Objects. For a moment, I was worried that Thomas is not what was going to come up when I typed in Dirty Objects. Marin, I believe. Marin. Everyone seems to be saying Marin. I'm just going to double check. Well, I think it's Wellsworth. Because I think he took a passenger train. He took a passenger train and he was headed towards Vickerstown or Barrow, wherever. And then wherever he terminated with his stopping train, he turned around and then picked up a slow freight. So we could assume that he picked the slow freight railway series. Yeah, okay. You guys seem to be agreeing that it's Wellsworth in the Railway series. So, brain. So, if his passenger service terminated at Kildane, let's say, then he would have turned around, picked up his slow freight, and he would have had to pick up and set off cars at every industry in between Kildane and Wellsworth. So that could be it. Now, if his passenger train terminated at Vickerstown or Barrow, then he would have been taking a through freight. But again, this could be a through freight that stopped at every yard. But still, both of those make sense. But this is where I love operations, is it can expand upon the stories, you know, to actually know what job he was actually doing that day. You know, yeah, we know he was taking a slow freight, but that's all we know. But I love the idea of expanding upon that and being like, no, he wasn't just taking a slow freight. He was taking a local from Kildane to Wellsworth, or he was taking a through freight from Barrow to Tidmouth that stopped and did work at Vickerstown, Kildane, and Wellsworth. What are the chances that he was supposed to take those tar tankers with him? What if those were his tar wagons that he was supposed to pick up and take with him to Tidmouth? Midnight goods. I mean, the midnight goods is just another either a through freight or express freight. So it's definitely not a local because it's not like it's just going straight out of Vickerstown. But yeah, I imagine the trains between running from between Vickerstown and Barrow, despite the fact that those are two main yards, those would qualify as a yard transfer. There are probably like 30 midnight trains. I imagine on the Northwestern they don't have too many late night trains. I don't. Not to say that they don't have overnight operations, but I imagine things are a lot more sparse over that period of time. Our post trains, goods trains. They're weird. They are weird because they are a goods train, but they're handled like a passenger train. Almost. I'm not sure. Yeah. I believe so. Okay, maybe they are just goods trains. I imagine there are 4 slow trains to head from Knapford to Kildane. To head from Knapford to Barrow. I'm not sure, because the more trains you get, the more crowded your railroad gets. Because you don't want to overdo it. Like 3-ish mail trains, late night express, and midnight goods. Post trains would half of the time be coupled onto passenger trains. I know at some point the mail run, like at some point in the timeline, the mail run is going to change, but it starts off as its own dedicated train. I think the branch lines will always have dedicated mail cars, but the main line at one point just might start putting mail on their passenger trains. So yeah. One thing I'm trying to avoid when it comes to the trains is I don't want to run too many trains that are redundant. Like a service from Knapford to Kildane. You should only have one. With the sheer amount of trains that would be traveling, I think one service from Knapford to Kildane is plenty. Now, there's also the service from Kildane to Knapford. Just for, well, that's just as an example. That actually wouldn't happen on my railroad, on my version, because Knapford isn't a classification yard. All right, so let's say Tidmouth to Kildane. You wouldn't run 2 trains from Tidmouth to Kildane because it's redundant. And there's so many different combinations. I'd try to avoid that unless it ends up necessary in the math of it all. How important is the milk industry on Sodor that it needs to have its own train that runs on its own express train schedule? Oh. I'm not sure the milk will be an express train on my well, you know, who knows? Maybe it will be. Maybe there'll be a really big dairy farm on Sodor. Since the milk can go bad if not gotten to the correct place on time. Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. You want to get that shit where it needs to go as fast as possible. Though without turning it into cream, preferably. Especially if you're doing this back in the olden days of, you know, everyone having a milkman. You know? And you really got to get that shit around fast. Before pasteurization, life was hard. Or so I've heard. We've all heard our story of that one parent that had to, you know, climb a mountain range in order to get to school through 10 feet of snow. The people on Sodor are champs for drinking disgusting milk out of tankers. It just occurred to me that they probably don't put milk in tankers in real life, do they? That doesn't actually happen, does it? Oh, they were pretty common. Okay. For anyone who's like, hears me say something and then is like, I just posted the answer to that. There's a delay. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So, you know, one of the most one of my favorite TWR pieces of rolling stock isn't completely useless. That makes me feel better about myself. Yeah. I'd almost imagine that like they use the tankers to like take it from one location to like the other take it from the location where they do all the pasteurization and stuff like that, and then they take it to another place where they put it in bottles. Well, it honestly doesn't surprise me that they'd transport alcohol in tankers, because it's like, it's alcohol. No one's going to fucking care. I now want uranium trains to be on an express timetable. Probably not. Though, hey, the lead mine gets repurposed as a uranium mine in the 90s. I think that is. I think it's the 90s when the uranium mine becomes a, or when the lead mine becomes a uranium mine. But yeah, milk trains probably aren't going to be a huge deal, but you know, just a common thing on the Farquhar branch, because I am going to have a dairy farm on the Farquhar branch, a dairy operation. Um, so, um, yeah, so for a while, Daisy will pull that one milk van around. But the reason Daisy pulls that milk van around is because that's bottled milk. That's where she stops at the station, and then the milkman takes that milk and then drops it off at people's doorsteps. So eventually, when pasteurization becomes a thing, she'll stop carrying that van around. But instead, you might see more tankers. Well, not more tankers. I'm not sure how to fit the tankers in. But the tankers will basically be how, you know, they take the milk from the location where they pasteurize it and take it to the place where they bottle it, I guess. Or maybe, no, they'd take it from the dairy at Ellsbridge, and then they would, the pasteurization, they pasteurize it at Tidmouth. So they take it from Ellsbridge to Tidmouth, it's pasteurized and bottled and then put into vans. Yeah. So, yeah, I've now figured out how milk works on trains. Boom. Now just to have figure out mail. Terry's not at Toyrick. It's at Ellsbridge. Okay, it is with one L. Or is it with two L's? I mean, if all the tankers ever carried, it shouldn't be two. Well, I'd imagine that they went in the tankers before pasteurization, because then pasteurization would kill any of the bacteria. Now, yes, these tankers would definitely be dedicated milk tankers, no matter what. But I'd imagine that these tankers only carry pre-pasteurized milk. And then pasteurization and the other thing, I forget what it's called, that's what kills all the bad bacteria. It also what takes anything that's good in milk out of it. However, it also kills all the bad stuff. But yeah, doop-de-doop-de-doo. Okay, there is no E in Elsbridge. That's weird. Well, there is an E, but there's not between the S and the B. Elsbridge. Yeah. Elsbridge is a pleasant small town of some 4,500 inhabitants in 1981. It has a flour mill and bakery, together with several small firms specializing in different forms of agricultural engineering. But the largest employer is St. Pederick's Dairy, situated in what was once a glebe field behind the vicarage and adjacent to the station. The dairy has won fame for its Callan cheese. It's not Callan from the TV series. I swear. Callan cheese and Ulfstead butter. The latter being made from the milk of cows pastured in the rich water meadows along the upper reaches of Els. Dedicated drug tankers, dedicated crack cabooses. Going back to express trains for a sec. Are there any express branch line trains? Would there be passenger/goods trains on branch lines? I imagine there are one or two. I don't know how to handle mixed traffic yet. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. There are no express trains on the branch line, because an express train on a branch line would be the same thing as a through freight on a branch line, or a through train, whether it be freight or passengers. Because the express, like an express freight on the main line is basically a through freight that goes from Tidmouth to Barrow and doesn't stop. That's what, and an express freight is just a type of through freight. The branch lines do not have enough going on to have an express freight, and certainly not to have an express train or an express passenger. Mixed traffic, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to handle it. I'd imagine there are mixed traffic trains. I'm just not sure how to do them. But yes, from what I can tell, the dairy is at Elsbridge, not Toryrick. Yeah. Because yeah. Tory Rick's thing is that it's the goods junction. It's the junction for the goods line. Yeah. Token system for the line to the harbor. That was just featured in one guy's own story, wasn't it? Because I don't know. I want to keep it all a nice, simple signal system. Try and keep it as straightforward as possible. So, I don't know. Probably not. It's probably all going to be signal work. Though I have recently come to the conclusion that I will need to have a dispatcher. I wanted to avoid it, but I'll have to. The dispatcher just does so much more than just make sure trains are where they're supposed to be. There's so much that I can't put that on to the yardmasters. So yeah, especially if not every station has their own yardmaster, you know, because one of my ideas was just that, like, okay, 2 yardmasters have to coordinate, whether a train can come onto the line between them or not. But there are so many stations in between that aren't going to have yardmasters. Turtles made an announcement. Let me take a look here. I'm guessing this was on Twitter. All right. That's right. I don't do Twitter on my computer often, so it's kind of like new territory. All right. Let's. Oh, is that this tumble down the line thing? Oh, cool. Okay, so he gets to film a video on the layout at Entertainment Junction. Awesome. I need to figure out where Entertainment Junction is, because I don't think it's that far from where I am. Like, I think it's a good road trips away. but I don't think it's so far as to be insane. Let's see. Enter Trainment Junction. Let's look it up. From wants me to choose a from. Let me just. My location. There. Never mind. Oh. Yeah, that's definitely a road trip. Probably longer road trips than I've ever taken. So yeah, that's on the probably on the wrong side of Ohio for me, really, because I'm kind of in the western Pennsylvania, not quite western, more central, more middle, but more west than middle, but more middle than west, and that's eastern Ohio. So yeah, that would be an 8-hour. That'd be an 8-hour trip. But hey, maybe it'd be worth it. I mean, let me think. That's 16 hours of driving. Could maybe do it if I had someone with me, but I don't think it's worth it. Well, I mean, maybe it is. The world's largest indoor model train display. Maybe it would be worth it if it's the world's largest. Maybe it'd be worth the trip. But why wouldn't it be worth it for you to go to the Magic Railroad show? I mean, for me, it's like based on if they're having it the same place, it should only be like 3-4 hours away for me. Maybe not even that much. But yeah, I'd honestly just go to Entertainment just to see it, because they sold Roadside America sold off their layout. They closed down, sold off all the pieces. I didn't even get a piece of it. Oh, okay. Well, I feel like COVID won't be too big of a deal, but I shouldn't say I feel like it. I honestly hope that COVID won't be too big of a deal by the time it runs around. But I could see where an 8-hour drive could be. Let me guess, you live in Eastern Ohio. But I can see where an 8-hour drive, it would be worth it for me, but I also know a bit more based on, again, last year. I was one of the people that was like, I was one of the people who was specifically invited through Lemmy. So, oh, Massachusetts. Okay. I just thought it funny that both of us, it was like, oh, this place is 8 hours away. And it's like, oh. But yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that looks far. Especially since, like, you'd have to cut through I don't know how New Yorky that part of New York would be, but my interpretation of New York is that it's all just one giant city. I know that's not how it actually is, but that's just what I picture. But yeah. But I think at this point I'm getting tired. I've mentioned just about everything. Yeah, this we typically cut this off at like 2.5 hours. We're going on 2:40. So yeah. I think thanks for joining in, everyone. Sorry Lemmy didn't show up. Fucking asshole. Not actually. This is a joke. Gotta say that these days. This is a joke. I love Lemmy as a friend. But like all friends, I can be irked sometimes. But I don't care. But yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See ya in a week. Thank Lord I don't have to do this twice a week anymore because that was starting to feel taxing. But yeah. See y'all next time. Bye, guys.